Evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome to this webinar sponsored by Fordham University's Francis and Anne Curran Center for American Catholic Studies. My name is Michael Lee, and as the director of the Curran Center, I am really honored to host this special panel. Our topic tonight concerns saints in the Catholic Church. The Jesuit theologian Karl Rahner once wrote, "Saints are the initiators and the creative models of the holiness which happens to be right for and is the task of their particular age. Saints prove that a certain form of life and activity is a really genuine possibility." So it's no surprise that historically over time and globally today, we see communities embracing figures who, in their age and in their contexts, were particular witnesses of holiness. The Catholic Church in the United States honors 11 of its own saints who by birth or immigration provided examples of holiness on our soil. Yet, none of these are of African descent. There are 6 women and men in the process: Venerable Pierre Toussaint, Henriette de Lille, and Augustus Tolton, and servants of God, Mother Mary Elizabeth Lang, Julia Greeley, and Thea Bowman. Yet, as the Black Catholic Messenger noted, taken all together, their causes have waited 714 years, and none have yet reached beatification, which is the final stage before canonization. So our webinar will focus on the struggle to see the first U.S. Black Catholic saints. Now, I'm honored to be joined this evening by 3 panelists. The first 2 are parishioners of St. Anne Catholic Church in East Baltimore, Ralph Moore and Dolores Moore, who, I will clarify, share the same last name but are not related or married. They are part of a remarkable effort, a letter-writing campaign to the Vatican to expedite the canonization of these 6 great figures. Our other panelist is Father Maurice Nutt of the Redemptorist Order. Among his many accomplishments, which really are too long for our short time tonight, include being a former convener of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium, a few members of which I believe are going to be with us tonight, and also publishing the award-winning book, Thea Bowman, Faithful and Free. So that's enough from me. Let's get to our discussion. And I'd like to start by asking each one of our panelists a question. Before I do so, I do want to encourage everyone who's attending this evening, if you have a question that comes up, we're going to have time at the end for Q&A. So please don't hesitate. If during the course of the webinar a question pops in your mind, go ahead and put that question in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat for our questions, and we'll try to get through as many as we can before our time is up. So let us begin. Maybe we can begin with you, Ralph. Can you describe for us the campaign that you all have begun as an effort to see these canonizations? How did it begin, and where are you in the process now?
Good evening, sisters and brothers. And Michael, thank you for inviting us to participate in this conversation tonight. Now, just for the record, we do not call this a campaign. We call it an initiative, because connotatively, we were trying to avoid people thinking that it was politics related, but nonetheless, it's very similar. I mean, we're offering petitions in the form of a letter to Pope Francis, and we're calling on him to canonize the first 6 African American candidates for sainthood in Catholic Church history, and particularly here in America, and we're urging him to canonize them immediately. If it's wrong now, we say, then fix it now. And the fact that there are 11 whites, Americans from the United States who are saints, and 0 African Americans in 2023 is amazing and, in fact, appalling. some ways. Anyway, so St. Anne has always been a bit of an activist church. You know, we've had pretty well-connected priests who got out into the community. We've had a congregation that was willing to get involved and do things. We were slated to be closed, as tends to happen to Black Catholic churches in these United States, in 1994. And immediately we started an effort to try to stop that by collecting pennies. And we called the campaign, or the initiative, Pennies to Heaven. And we collected something like 3 million pennies, which sounds like a lot more than it is in dollars. It's only $30,000, but the concern was the roof, and so it was a good down payment on fixing the roof. But when the MTA, for example, came to us and asked for us to help them because they had a bus yard in their neighborhood that had been increased, it had been doubled in size, and diesel buses were spewing into people's backyard a matter of feet away from where they lived. So we've been active, and we dealt with that for about 2 or 3 years. So we decided to embark on this initiative to get the first 6 Black saints canonized, and to engage the community, the worldwide community in some ways, in this effort. And we actually, when we started, didn't realize that there are no African-American saints from the US. We had just not thought about it at all. And as we dug deeper, we realized that is the case, while there are 11 whites, as we've talked about. So we decided that it was a little harder to get people to write their own letter to the Pope. It was a little intimidating for a lot of people. So we decided to fashion a letter and urge people to sign it. And so we did that, and we started at a mass at St. Anne, which hundreds of people came to. The Bishop Lewandowski, blessed those letters and blessed the 6 portraits of the candidates we had installed in the church. And then other churches started to get involved. We contacted other churches here in the Archdiocese of Baltimore, and eventually letters were coming in from all over the country. People were very surprised, as we were, that reality existed in terms of the racial disparity, the racial exclusion, and all. And so people were enthusiastic at best to sign the letter. So we've collected them. We have, in fact, mailed 2 different packets to Pope Francis at Vatican City. The first one had, I think, about 1,500. The second one had a little bit more than 1,500. We sent copies to the Pope's ambassador in Washington. We're still waiting to hear from those folks. We sent them in 2021 and 2022. I'm sure there's a letter coming from them sometime. Maybe not. But anyway, and people have been really enthusiastic to participate. And there are still initiatives going on. I know that there's a high school that's been doing them all week long, and they'll continue next week among the student body and the staff. So that's the campaign. It's a simple letter, and it urges the Pope to act immediately on this situation.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, it was just a little clip in a newspaper that I saw, and I was just amazed by your efforts and this grassroots kind of voice that really does honor the long tradition of the saints. I mean, it is people's communities that have lifted them up, and so I think you really do honor that. And so, Dolores, I wanted to ask you, and maybe we do need to note, of course, that Saint Kateri Tekakwitha is an indigenous person who is a U.S. saint, but no Black U.S. African-American saints. But Dolores, as you've carried out this initiative, what lessons have you learned? How would you say, for instance, that the struggle to see these canonizations is reflective of the wider U.S. Black Catholic experience? Dolores, I think you're muted.
I would say it very much parallels what we experience in society as well as in the Catholic Church. And I want to add too with Ralph, I was flabbergasted that I never even thought about it. I just assumed good people are declared saints, and I was just shocked that there wasn't one, but there are 6 in the pipeline. What's the holdup? What has prevented their entry? Clearly, we see them as 6 saints already, but what is the process that is preventing this from happening? And it looks like what we've seen throughout history in the church. And when I joined the church as a child, I came from a Baptist family who didn't really consider Catholics as Christians. So I went to church as a closet Catholic. I would go in the morning and then walk across town to go to the Baptist church. So for years, they never knew that I was really going to a Catholic church. But I was, as a child, I was not astonished by the fact that I was in Connecticut at the time, the Puerto Ricans and the Blacks always sat at the back of the church. Well, I wasn't taking communion because I hadn't been baptized, so I didn't understand all the semantics, but I did know that difference. And as I became an adult, I decided I had the right to speak up and say I wanted to be Catholic at the age of 25. But what we find in our church is the same thing in society. The church very much parallels it. And that's to be expected. These people are coming out of the communities and are then going into the churches. We've seen with white flight the absence of our counterparts of other ethnic groups. And so it's concerning that we didn't expect it. I really didn't expect it from the Catholic Church. It matched my spirituality, and I thought it matched the things that were in the Bible. And so I was really shocked to find, and I was quiet. I think that's what we're experiencing, that most of us don't talk up. We love the church so much. We assume that the church is doing everything in our best interest. And we've accepted that for years, even though we see disparity in the way the treatment that we receive. And I think with this initiative, the main thing for us was that we had to have an approach. If we were silent about what was going on, most of us didn't know. I know Father Nutt was probably more informed than most of us, but we didn't know that this process was going on. The guilds were doing their work, and I would applaud them because they have really pushed the boulder up the mountain. And so I'm not critical of anything that's being done by any of the guilds, but I feel that at this point, unless we are more unified and cohesive in our efforts, sharing our resources as we can, information that they may learn that would help another guild, I think we have to do that. We're not in competition. These people would never have been in competition. And I would dare to say they would never even have considered being a saint. That was not in their modus operandi. And so I feel that we need to stop playing the game that other people want us to play. We're not in competition. We're not trying to change the structure. We're saying, look at the structure. Look at how this process falls out. And if there's clearly groups being left out, is not an equitable system, and it needs to be fixed. And this whole scenario about we feel like we've been talked down to. Anybody can go on the internet, find out anything you want. And we've done that. We've done our research. We're not saying that we know everything, but we can clearly see this is not a Christian way to conduct this process. And we want to have a chance to have the dicastery of the causes of saint, we want to have a little conversation. We're not that important, maybe, but maybe our observations might help the process for others, as well as what's happening in the future, what is happening right now. And look at your definition of miracles. I've heard that they may be considering looking at that. But what is a miracle to you? It may not be a miracle to the rest of us. And what is a miracle to us clearly has not been a miracle to them. You know, if we had people who have been slaves, yet they still love the church, they serve the church hasn't been kind to them. They've enslaved people, they've sold people, they rejected these people. Yet we didn't walk away from the church. We stayed, we endured. Then we need to correct what is not right. And I like what Father Nutt referred to, that this type of Christianity and service as spiritual martyrdom. Think about it. You've pretty much tried to kill the spirit of the people. And yet these sisters persisted and they started orders. You know, there's a lot to be said about it, and I just need to be quiet right now.
Hardly at all. But having alluded to him, and he's been waiting patiently, you know, this process can be complicated on the outside. I mean, I know in my research on Oscar Romero that the whole cause for sainthood was a real complicated process. So, Father Nutt, I wonder, can you give us a quick sense of this process and maybe what you see as the obstacles for these six figures?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Lee. It's so good to be with everyone. And next time, if we do this, don't put me after that preaching woman, Dolores. I mean, wow, I'm supposed to be the preacher, boy, but I love listening to her. It is an arduous task to get someone canonized. I even think back to, as a Redemptorist, my own sainted founder, St. Alfonso Liguori, took 52 years to be canonized. He's Italian, he was a doctor of the church, moral theologian, bishop, and it took 52 years for him. Many of our early, even white American saints, they took a long time. Two books before I get into the cause of canonization, you may want to note. One is by Kathleen Sparrows Cummings. It's called A Saint of Our Own. It's in particular about Sister Elizabeth Ann Seton, the first American saint. And it also deals with the question of American canonization process. And the other book is, I just happen to have it, is Making Saints. And it's by Kenneth L. Woodward. It was written in 1990. And it is how the Catholic Church determines who becomes a saint and who doesn't and why. So I think that's very important for especially Ralph and Dolores picked that book up. It'll help out a lot. I was asked by the Diocese of Jackson to do the initial research on the cause of canonization of Sister Thea Bowman. Sister Thea, Franciscan Sister of Perpetual Adoration, great scholar, evangelist, singer, and one who believed in racial reconciliation. She was my teacher and my spiritual mother and mentor. So she is considered the only contemporary cause compared to the other five who are historical causes. The distinction is if you wait 30 years plus after someone passed, typically it's 5 years after someone dies that you can begin opening the canonization process. Of the six, 4 are being led by diocese or archdiocese, and the 2, which I'm really concerned about, are of Mother Henriette DeLille, Venerable Henriette DeLille, and Mother Mary Lang, Servant of God, Mother Lang, because they're being promulgated by 2 African American women's orders, and they barely have $1 million to take care of themselves, let alone how much it costs to canonize. That money in itself is a concern that I have. The process begins by looking at the spiritual biography of someone's life, looking at their heroic virtues, doing an initial look at if they have any writings or the virtue of their own lives of holiness. That was my task for the Diocese of Jackson for Thea Bowman's cause. And we do personal research. People knew her. So there are quite a few people who are still alive who knew Thea Bowman. So they were right at my hands to do interviews with. Seeing that there was no objection, the Bishop Joseph Kopass opened up her cause. So that's the initial cause for servant of God. Then he petitions the Vatican, but in the case of American bishops, this is something new that the U.S. Bishops' Conference has started. If an American bishop should open up a cause, they're asking for a vote of confidence by the whole U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Being that before Sister Thea died, she actually addressed the U.S. bishop. Unanimously voted for her. It's a collegial vote to see if the cause should move forward. And once the cause is open, the investigation begins. The investigation includes, again, looking at the heroic virtues of the candidate for sainthood. Those heroic virtues include, that they exemplify a life of holiness, that their life was surrounded by a life of goodwill and good deeds and prayer. Also, if they have written anything, you have to comb through all the writings, making sure that there was nothing heretical that person ever said. It is also an interview process that takes place is confidential with all of those people that are listed who knew them. And they ask them a series of questions and they transcribe those questions. All of these make up what is called a positio, or a dossier that goes to the dicastery for the causes of saints. The venerables have already completed that stage. The servants of God are still in the process of getting their positio accepted. Once a positio is accepted, what makes them venerable is a question Dr. Lee wanted to ask me, and I'm going to answer it anyway. You asked me, what's the difference? Once the College of Cardinals in the dicastery of causes of saints and those working in there find that there is nothing that would impede in any way their cause from moving forward, they send it to the Holy Father. The Pope then names that person a venerable, which means that they are worthy of emulation and imitation, and they live a life of holiness. And I'm quickly going to go over to the first two. They're open to be considered for beatification. Beatification requires one, and I don't use the word miracle because the dicastery of causes of saints forbid it. You have to say a medical unexplained occurrence. And it has to be instantaneously almost. That's what they're looking for. Not that you were under the doctor's care, or you took these pills, or you went under this radiation treatment. It has to be free of any of that. And through the intercession, and get this, of one saint. You can't be praying to the whole host of heaven, to the Blessed Virgin Mary, that one person and that one person alone, so that they can attribute it to it. Let me just tell you, one of the six, there was a wonderful miracle that should have put that person through to beatification. But the person said, well, I did pray to that person, but I also prayed to about 3 other holy people. So that was discounted. And I know that I see my friend Dolores is going to pull her hair off with all of that, but it does. It's so it wasn't counted. After a person is beatified, and what's wonderful about beatification, it's going to happen right in the home archdiocese of the ceremony will happen. So the wonderful thing is that Baltimore will one day have a beatification. New Orleans will have, when the saints come marching in down here in New Orleans, and Jackson, Mississippi, and the other cities will have the beatification take place there. And quickly, guess what? If you had, say, 3 or 4 causes that were unexplainable occurrences, medical occurrences, all of them for beatification, all of them would then just have to go away. And that doesn't make any sense to me, but that's the rule. You have to have, while that person is a blessed, if prayers are being made to seeking their intercession, then that's when you can count those. So it's a lot of strings attached. I learned a lot through this process. And so it takes a lot of prayer. And given to the point of Ralph and Dolores, perhaps some things need to be contested about all that is involved in making someone a saint.
Yeah, it is such a complicated process, and thank you so much for laying out those pieces of it. But just as an observer, it's striking that having been a part of and witnessed canonization processes where the figure was being debated. In this case, it doesn't seem like anyone's questioning the holiness of these six figures. It's just this mysterious question. Why is this taking so long? I wonder if, and I'll open it to any of you three. What is it that's the cause of this delay? It's not in any one of the six. So what do you think it is?
Well, I think when you consider that saints were declared by public acclamation in the early days of the church, and most of them were martyrs, actually. So it was sort of easy, I guess, or easier. But the Catholic Church has become much more complicated, much more bureaucratic. And one of the popes, it might have been Pope Urban, decided that only he could declare who would be designated a saint. And the process led up to his making that decision and future popes following him. So, and then it became expensive, and then it became, these miracles and all these rules and all that. And, the great thing about Sister Thea Bowman is that many of us can remember who she was. And that's a value to know what a saint looks like and feels like to be around someone in our times, as opposed to somebody who Mother Lang has gone on to glory for 141 years. As you mentioned earlier, Michael, we, as part of our process, added up the number of years that each one of these saints had passed on, and it came to be 714, 715 years, or it may be more by now. But it's just it's a process and a situation that's kind of out of touch with everyday people, and the ability, the fact that it's so expensive, the fact that it takes so long, the fact that it's got to be, what do you call it, a medical miracle in terms of, I don't know how many people would not take medication, would not get a doctor's treatment. So that's very limiting. I mean, the first instinct is to get some help. So it's just very, very challenging, and it's frustrating. Most saints in the Catholic Church are white males from Europe, right? And so we're boxed out that way too. So this needs to change. The Pope said recently, a few weeks ago, that we need more women saints. Well, here's a chance for him to get and do 6 of them. I mean, 4 of them out of the 6 in one swoop. And again, we're very serious that they should be canonized immediately. The church owes that to the Black American Catholic community.
Yeah, I wonder, in the face of this, to look optimistically, I wonder what you would say. What would be the impact of these canonizations positively? What effect would it have for African American Catholics or for the wider church?
It's one little step closer, and I don't want to hog the conversation, you two. It's one little step closer to being recognized as first-class members. The Catholic Church has had a history in this country of white supremacy. You could be a white supremacist and a good Catholic at the same time. And part of that was to exclude blacks and brown people. From the convent, that's where the Oblate Sisters got started, why they got started, and Mother Henrietta DeLille's group, Holy Family. From convents, seminaries, churches, schools, hospitals, jobs, Catholic housing. We were excluded from all of that. And it was kind of shameful to us, shameless to them. And we couldn't quite fathom it. We stayed around and kept the faith, and we were the remnant. But it didn't make sense to us that in church we were told to sit off to the side. We were told to sit in the back. We were told to sit upstairs. And we couldn't figure out how that reconciled with the Gospels of our Lord Jesus. And yet it was. And in fact, I've said this before, but we know that in 1974, the Ku Klux Klan voted to admit white Catholics into their membership. And they did it on the basis of the fact that they said they saw no evidence that the white Catholics were supporting racial justice. But that's the whole. And so this fact that there are no Black Catholic saints feels to us like it's a relic of those days. And that's why it needs to go. It seems to be something that has survived the blatantly racist days of the Catholic Church in America.
And so, Ralph, if I can help,
go ahead.
Ladies first. My mother raised me well. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. You spoke first. I can wait.
Well, I would just simply say this. It says that the idea of having these saintly six canonized, it gives proof and it gives witness that the Roman Catholic Church is truly Catholic, that it is universal, that all are welcome and all are represented. The fact that we do not have any African-American Catholic saints that are canonized and recognized by the church, it hinders, in some ways, it suspends us from being truly Catholic. I love that Pope Francis went around the country, taking these small places, went around the world looking at these small places and says, we're going to make a cardinal there so that the College of Cardinals can more look like the Universal Catholic Church. I think the same should be with the saints of the church. Also, it will also be definitively stated that the church is against racism. All six of these candidates dealt with, experienced, were hindered by racism in their convents, like Sister Thea, or outside, that we cannot recognize a religious woman of color being a holy and chaste a saint, a woman of religion, or even Father Tolton, the misery that man went from being a slave to even when he became a Catholic priest and was really rejected by many of our white Catholics. Racism has hindered them. I think enduring the sin of racism and still remaining faithful to the Roman Catholic Church, Black Catholics, we exemplify an uncommon faithfulness. Even when we have been rejected, we have said, this is our church. We're Catholic born, Catholic bred, and baby, when we die, we'll be Catholic dead. That's the of Black Roman Catholics. We love our church.
Yes.
Asking for a little love back from Mother Church.
Right. I should have gone first.
I was getting you that from the first time. Go ahead now, Dolores.
I think the canonization of these six would be like the sprout from Jesse's stem, a sign of hope and new life that the Catholic Church is readily in need of mending. It needs to mend its ways and start to untether itself to its past sins of sexism, of racism, and discrimination and segregation. Hope springs eternal. We want to attract people. We've been criticized because they're saying, what is going on with the Black Catholics? They're leaving the church in droves. They're not coming back. You're not doing something right. But the hierarchy never looks at what they are doing. It's our problem that you started, and we have to fix it, but you don't want to hear from us. You don't want us to share what we are experiencing. You'll fix it. Father knows best. That gets us, sorry, Father, no, that gets us in trouble. You know, you got to hear from the lay people. This thing about us being, I'm on my soapbox now, but this thing about us being sheep and you are the shepherd. Look at how the shepherd works. The sheep lead, the shepherd follows. He collects all of the strays along the way. That's his real job. So why not listen to laity? We love the church. I'm not going anywhere. And I've said I will be buried from St. Anne's. I don't care whether or not the doors are closed. My family knows we'll have the funeral on the sidewalk. That's how much I love the church. And I love the church into doing the right thing for all of us. We've excluded so many people. It's our fault that that our folks are going to other faiths. It's our fault because we see things that are not right and we accept them in silence. It's time to speak up. All of us need to be speaking up.
And if I can just add to this thought is, you asked the question, Michael Lee, Dr. Lee, about identify key ingredients or actions that are needed to make canonization happen. I think a caution for us as Black Catholics is to remind, even though we're proud that these saintly six are ours, there are models for the universal Catholic Church. They can't just stay in our nice little alcoves of enclaves of Catholicism. They have to be made known. So any way that the saintly six can be known universally, encouraged to seek their intercession, is helpful in the process of their canonization. We're looking for people that have appeal that is international. And I do say these saintly six, their lives, their deeds are certainly worthy of international emulation.
Yes. And one other thing I want to interject, I know I'm out of order. However, I have a problem with isolated prayers. I don't know how to pray in a silo. Mm-hmm. I pray to everybody I know. From Jesus to God, I don't know how you cannot be praying for more than one person. To pray to one saint is really ludicrous. I'm sorry, Father. But let me that's say, how I see it.
It's easy when the saint that you are appealing for, which I appeal for all six, but Thea Bowman was my spiritual mother. When you're in trouble, when you're in need, you call on Mama. And so it's very easy for me to go to Amwood Cemetery in Memphis and just talk to her. And I talked to Henrietta Lille here in New Orleans, but it's important to have a relationship. And so if I'm in trouble and I need something, I'll have to say this boldly and publicly. I go to her first because.
Sure, I agree with
you. We're Mother Lang people.
I know you Mother Lang people. I saw you do pray in silos.
You know, but I think the case is stronger for the six of them. I think that you don't want to see just one and then they'd be done with it and all. That it makes a stronger statement, and they're all worthy. They've been worthy and all, and it's time for this to happen. And if there's any result of them finally recognizing these six, we can now be able to say the Catholic Church hears us, because they don't seem to see us and they don't hear us. And we shouldn't have to be pressing this hard. We've got a zero. And somebody should be ashamed of that. Somebody should be concerned about that. They can do something about it.
I want to say this, Ralph, when we discussed this the other day when we were speaking, I do feel, and I have to say this from my heart, that I believe, thank God, first of all, for Pope Francis. Mm-hmm. Thank God for his openness. Pope Francis, I believe, knows more than we think he knows that is going on in America. As I mentioned the other day, his response in naming Black shepherds or bishops and archbishops have been in a direct response to some of the political and racial reckoning going on in our country. Take Washington, D.C., and when Archbishop Cardinal Wilton Gregory was named during the presidency of Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. Look at the fact that in Louisville, Kentucky, you have Breonna Taylor being brutalized by the police and killed, and then the Holy See names Archbishop Sheldon Faub there. Look at what happened in Charleston, South Carolina, with the Manual 9 there, and their brutal murder while Bible studies going on. This was the first time in history that a Black man didn't have to be, I would say, after in known history, Bishop Healy, James Healy, was named in 1875 in Portland, Maine. But the first time that a Black man in this modern era was named an ordinary, didn't have to go through an auxiliary process. He was named Ordinary of Charleston. I say all those things because I believe that's the Vatican's response to racial hatred and the sin of racism in our country. So I want to say that in order to understand that, and when us all to understand that they're slow, but they know, and I believe that there will in time, if we continue our rallying of our saintly six to the Holy See and to the American Catholic Church, I believe in time the process will move forward.
Well, I just would hope that we could get more active listening from them. We were talking the other day about the woman in 1853 who wrote to the Pope. Her name was Harriet Thompson, and she wrote to him to say that we're not being treated as Black Catholics very kindly by the priest and by the bishops and all. And she dashed that letter off, and some people credit her with helping to establish the Black Catholic movement. She did that letter before the Dred Scott decision. She did it before the Civil War. So you can feel what the times were like for her. But I don't think she ever got a letter back or a message back from the Vatican. And I first read about that in Father Cyprian Davis's book on Black Catholic history.
That letter. We had never known about that letter till he went into the Vatican archives and found it.
Right. And there was a piece on the tablet today that shows a picture of the letter, coincidentally, and the what do you call it? The message that it was about. But and I appreciate what you're saying about their response to things. But we've sent 3,000 letters. We've called the ambassador to the Pope's office and sent letters to him. We've been trying to call the Vatican and set up an appointment. There should be some way for everyday folks. I know it's a bureaucracy. I know it's a curia, all of that. But everyday folks to make some connections with the church and with the church hierarchy. And it's a lot more complicated than it should be. And there's a whole lot of non-answers to folks in a church that seems to be struggling to keep people in the pews in this country. So some of this doesn't make sense. And we've got to bring things up to the 21st century, certainly, in terms of how communication occurs, how people view their rank and how they should be treated and how they should treat others. I've been a Catholic all my life. I've been a Catholic since I was 3 months old. In those days you were required to be baptized before you were 3 months old. I've been a lifelong Catholic. I admit I left for a while. I went and joined the Baptist church for a while because, I wasn't feeling so fulfilled in terms of being a young man who was Black and proud. And you couldn't see any evidence in any church images of black people or brown people. You know, all white, everything, everywhere you went, and it's still that way in many churches. And we can represent ourselves. We don't need to have the church say to us, you know, as long as we have men and women, they all represent you. They just happen to all look like white people, especially with blonde hair and blue eyes. So
Let me say this, we can represent ourselves. Can we?
yes,
I believe that. I believe that personally, but the church is hierarchical. And they expect us to go through our bishops. And so that's the rub.
and we don't have many, right?
But are they representing us?
Well, I'm not in a position to. We need to connect with them.
You asked the question, so I'm bringing it back to you. You know, you're saying you write to the hierarchy, you don't hear from them. You know, you bring it up to them personally, and they have their own way of dealing with things.
Right.
So
They could do more and better. They could do more and be better. I'm sure. I think they've had stronger, braver moments. You know, when I was a senior in high school and a freshman in college, I was very much influenced by Black priests who came to Baltimore and spoke in a symposium. You know, Father Larry Lucas and Father George Clemens and the priest who got the Missa Luba started. I can't remember his name, but anyway, and Phil Linden. He was a Josephite at the time. And they spoke and they said, and it was really unusual at the time. They said the Catholic Church is a white racist institution, and they were right. They were absolutely right. So I don't know. We just have to keep pushing. People might not be happy with it, but we have to keep pushing. We have to be resilient and we have to be persistent and gather as many people as we can. And we've connected with people all over the world. We've connected with people in Germany, in Italy, in Canada, you know, I think we can connect with people in Africa and other places. And we're just going to keep going. We're not going to stop. You know, T.S. Eliot said, "We have failed only when we are stopped trying."
Just to roll this back to our initiative, I'll be quick. It was a three-pronged approach. And tonight is part of what we hope to do was awareness, education, and advocacy. And what you hear, if you're hearing it for the first time this evening, pass it on. That's the only way we can get that out, the truth out. And we all love our church. It's not unique, this unique love between the Blacks and the Catholic Church, but we all love the church and we wouldn't be here. So we need to do whatever we can do to make it right. Right, sisters?
That gets us to a couple of questions that folks have posed. Actually, one of the first was about if others could, other parishes could access the letter, and Ralph put his email in the chat. So if you are part of a parish that would want to access this letter, they can still keep writing, Dolores? And
yes, yes. We're still receiving letters, and we encourage that. And it's not restricted to Catholics only, because we do see it as a justice issue. Non-Catholics and Catholics are signing. And as you heard Ralph say, the high schoolers are signing as well. And we encourage you to write your own letter if you want to do that. And people have done that as well. But right now we have it in French online, I think, Ralph. In
French, Spanish, and German.
Okay.
And English, of course. But yeah, we intend to hand carry a batch of these letters. We've got about 500 of them now. Carry them to Rome with us when we go, once we get our appointment with the Pope and or the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints. And if anyone wants to help us get to Rome, send me a note in the chat. We could always use some help. We're just a small ragtag bunch of Catholics who want to see some changes made And we've worked very hard at this. We're not paid. We just worked hard at it. And we've made some good connections. We've made good connections with the media. We've made good connections with Catholics all over, religious orders and everyday Catholics. And we feel that the Spirit is helping this move this along, the Holy Spirit.
And I do want to acknowledge the School Sisters of Notre Dame and some of the associates and one or two. Thank you. They have really supported us a great deal. So we appreciate that.
Sure. There have been lots of groups. There's been the Pax Christi. There's been the Black Catholic Messenger that I think Michael referred to earlier. We've had some time on CNN. Of course, the Catholic National Catholic Reporter, the Catholic Review here in Baltimore, the Washington Post. So and part of what we're trying to do is educate the public, to create public education about these six, because there are people in Baltimore who've never heard of Mother Mary Lang, except that one of the great benefits is that about 3 years ago, the Archdiocese built its first Catholic school in 60 years, and it was named for Mother Lang. So people can't get back and forth downtown without seeing this building. But one of the concrete things that would result from these saints being canonized is that Catholic churches could be named for them. You know, there are no Catholic churches in the United States that are named for African Americans from the United States, not a single one. And until, I believe the rule is, Father, right, that it has to be a saint to have their names put on a church.
As a blessed. Once they're beatified, you can have a church name after a blessed.
Well, so we still don't have any, right?
Right.
Right. So, and that's a shame. That's sad. I'm sorry.
I'm going to ask, were there any other questions that are being posed to us, Dr. Lee?
Well, in speaking of communication, someone asked if St. Anne's was able to participate at all in the synod process. That is being touted as a way that Catholics can raise their voices and communicate to the wider church. Was St. Anne's able at all to, through the synod process, communicate with others?
We did participate. We're a pastorate of 3 churches, St. Anne, St. Wenceslas, and St. Francis Xavier. And we did we did virtually and in person. But the questions were restricted to 3, and they were selected by the pastor or whoever selected. It could have been the Archdiocese, I don't know for sure, but it was restricted. We weren't free to talk about things that we wanted to unless we just interjected it, but it was scripted. I think that was a disadvantage to have been scripted so much.
We're running short on time. And if I may, I wondered if you each could just say a word or two about one of these 6 figures and what you feel is most important about their witness, about their example. What gravitates you toward one of these 6 figures?
Can I go first?
No. Yes, go ahead.
Of course, I love Mother Mary Lang. Here she was with the other 3 sisters that helped her found the Oblates, and they taught the children of slaves how to read. They thought that those children should be able to read the Bible, and they would get to know God better if they could read the Bible themselves. And it wasn't just the simple fact that they did that in the school that eventually became St. Francis Academy, which is still in operation after 190 some years. But it took courage. At that time, in many places, in the country in general, it was illegal to teach slaves how to read, and they did anyway. They answered to a higher cause. And in some places, people would get could get killed for doing that. I'm not sure. I get different answers about whether or not that was the case in Maryland. But anybody could have stepped up and done harm to those sisters because of what they were doing. But they did it anyway, and I think that's very admirable. And again, we're talking about miracles, but it's a miracle that they survived that. It's a miracle that their order has survived, and it's a miracle that the school they started is still around after all these years.
Go ahead, Dolores.
No, because you're going to pick the one I want.
No. You're gonna be surprised. Go ahead and say.
Okay. Well, I would say it's hard to. Each one has a special trait, but I like those two lay people as well. I like Julia Greeley because she was a slave and she was injured. Her eyesight in one eye was injured by the lashing of a master's whip. I believe he was beating a mother and he hit her in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
This lady had nothing. She was a servant. She really came as a slave to a family, but she was a servant. So, she wasn't making a lot of money, but somehow she managed to gather food, clothing, whatever. She was a listener. She would listen to people and see what their needs were. And it didn't matter if they were black or white. She had a little red wagon. She would go to those houses at night so that she wouldn't embarrass the people and leave whatever they needed at their doorstep. And they considered her the angel of Denver, especially for the firemen. She would go to various firehouses and give them tracts and pray with them. She was a special kind of lady. She didn't have much, but she gave much. And I like Pierre Toussaint was a hairdresser. He also was a slave, but he managed to make a fortune, but there wasn't, and he gave that to the church. He's buried in the cathedral in New York. But what was special about him, what I identify with, he took every opportunity to tell his customers about God and what Jesus had done for him. And he ministered to them while he was fixing their hair. And they weren't black folk because we didn't go to no hairdress. But he would be fixing these elaborate hairdos and all the while bringing them to Christ with his sharing of the message. And so I thought those two lay people were really extra special too.
Dr. Lee, I was going to say the two lay people. So
No, you weren't.
I really well. I had my whole speech prepared, and she just took every word out of my mouth. But let me just go ahead and say this about Augustus Tolton and his ability to persevere in the midst of the hardship and the racism that he went through. I love him because he was a good preacher. Lord knows the Catholic Church needs good preachers. And white pastors were upset with him because was coming to his church instead of going to their white churches, So I say that in Thea Bowman simply this, that woman lived her life loving the Lord and loving people until she died. And she radiated that and wanted to see all God's people, no matter what your racial ethnicity was, that we all be one and we be brothers and sisters and treat one another like brother and sisters. But thank God for the holy saintly six, all of them.
Well, and thank you to you three, because in a time in our country when historical memory is being dismissed or silenced or tossed out of classrooms, your effort is a way to retrieve that memory and these amazing figures and what they endured and how they were resilient is an important memory, as you said, Dolores, for Catholics, but for all of us. They teach us justice. They teach us holiness in the face of structural evil. And you have really blessed us tonight, and with your initiative, with your effort, that we all need to be allied with. And And when I was working in El Salvador, they would say, well, it doesn't matter if Oscar Romero is canonized. He's already canonized by the people. And yes, in one sense, that is true. And no one can take that kind of devotion away from the people of God. At the same time, Oscar Romero is now the global saint. And that can't be taken away. And I just think you have filled us with inspiration and hope for that day when we can call these 6 saints, truly, and as a global community, acknowledge them, name our churches after them, instruct our children as to this is what holiness looks like. So thank you very much on behalf of the Curran Center. This is really, this has been a tremendous evening for us. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and for raising awareness and education, and we hope to join with your advocacy.
Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in. This has been really a wonderful turnout.
Thank you all. God bless everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night.
night.